They were promised freedom, land, and a new beginning. But a century later, those promises were broken. Faced with losing their language, their faith, and even their sons to the Russian army, thousands of German families made an unthinkable choice: to leave everything behind and cross an ocean. It all began in 1763, when Catherine the Great of Russia invited German farmers to settle in her empire. She promised them free land, religious freedom, and no military service. For over a century, they prospered. But by the 1870s, the Russian government broke their promises. Military service became mandatory. Schools could no longer teach in German. Their freedoms were slipping away. And so thousands turned their eyes to America, the land of the Homestead Act, free land, and a chance to preserve their culture. Among them were my great-grandparents. In 1889, they arrived in New York, traveled by train to South Dakota, and then by wagon to the prairies of North Dakota. They built a sod house, broke the prairie soil, and raised their family in one of the harshest but most hopeful landscapes in America. This is the story of the Germans from Russia and the courage it took to begin again. In the 1760s, Russia was ruled by Empress Catherine the Great. She had a big idea: invite skilled farmers from other countries to settle in Russia's empty frontier lands. In 1763, she issued a manifesto, an open invitation, asking Germans and other Europeans to move to Russia. To convince them, she made amazing promises which included free transportation to Russia, big pieces of land with water and timber, freedom to practice religion, the right to speak their own language and run their own schools, no taxes for up to 30 years, and best of all, they would never have to serve in the Russian army. For many Germans, this sounded like a dream. Back home in Central Europe, they faced crop failures, high taxes, wars, and not enough land to farm. Thousands accepted Catherine's offer. In the 1760s and 1770s, families moved to Russia and founded villages along the Volga River and later in the fertile Black Sea region of Ukraine. They spoke German, farmed the land, practiced their Lutheran or Catholic faith, and kept their traditions. For more than 100 years, life was good, and their villages prospered. My own ancestors left Germany and moved to Russia in 1831. These settlers became known as Volga Germans or Black Sea Germans, depending on where they lived. They were allowed to live apart from Russian neighbors and kept their language and customs. Later czars, like Alexander I, continued Catherine's promises. By the mid-1800s, the German colonies had grown into thriving farm communities. They became expert wheat farmers on the steppes of Russia. Most still remembered their grandparents had come from Germany, but by then, Russia was the only home they knew. In the 1870s, things changed. Tsar Alexander II decided to take away their special rights. In 1871, the government announced that Germans would no longer be exempt from military service. Schools were ordered to teach in Russian, not German. Their local self-government was taken away. And in 1874, the draft began, forcing young German men into the Russian army. For the German colonists, this was a turning point. They were proud of being German and wanted to keep their traditions. Now they faced losing their language, their independence, and even their sons to the Russian army. At the same time, new opportunities appeared across the ocean. In the 1870s, land agents from the United States visited German villages in Russia. They described the wide open prairies of the American West, land that was free or cheap. America had no kings, no forced military service, and promised freedom to live as they pleased. So beginning in the late 1870s and 1880s, thousands of German families left Russia for North America. They had four main reasons for leaving. One was to avoid military service. They didn't want their sons drafted into the Russian army. Two, they wanted to keep their culture. They wanted to preserve their German language, religion, and traditions. Three, economic opportunity. The U.S. Homestead Act of 1862 offered 160 acres of free land if they built a house and farmed it for 5 years. And four, they received encouraging letters from early settlers. Scouts who left early sent back success stories from Nebraska and the Dakotas. Between 1870 and 1920, about 120,000 Germans from Russia came to the United States. Many settled in the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas. Others went to Canada, Brazil, and Argentina. My great-grandparents were part of this migration. In 1889, they left their village of Lichtental, Bessarabia in South Russia. They traveled by train across Europe, then boarded a steamship for New York. After about 2 weeks at sea, they arrived at New York Harbor. Immigrants were processed at Castle Garden, and after 1892, Ellis Island. Families were checked for health and legal issues before entering the U.S. From New York, my great-grandparents took a train to Eureka, South Dakota. Eureka was a gateway town for many Germans from Russia. There, they bought supplies, a wagon, and oxen or horses, and then traveled north by wagon into North Dakota to claim land. When they arrived in North Dakota, the land was wide open and treeless. Thanks to the Homestead Act, they could claim 160 acres by building a house and farming for 5 years. My great-grandparents built a sod house, made of thick blocks of prairie grass and soil. These homes were simple but sturdy, warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Life was tough. Winters were freezing, summers were hot and dry, and farming the land was backbreaking. But with determination, they built a life, raised their children, and created a future. German-Russian settlers often stayed close to people from the same villages in Russia. In south-central North Dakota, counties like McIntosh, Logan, and Emmons became known as the German-Russian Triangle. They built churches where services were given in German, founded small towns, and kept their old traditions alive. In their homes, they spoke German, cooked familiar foods like Nefla soup, kuchen, and sauerkraut. They celebrated holidays as they had in Russia and Germany. These traditions lasted for generations. Even today in North Dakota, you can still taste their food, hear their stories, and see their legacy churches, cemeteries, and even preserved sod houses. The story of the Germans from Russia is one of courage and perseverance. They left Germany for Russia in search of freedom, then left Russia for America when the freedom was threatened. My great-grandparents were just one of the families among thousands, but their courage helped shape the history of North Dakota. Today, their traditions, foods, and faith live on. It's a story of promise, hardship, and heritage, and I'm proud to share it. I hope this story was easy to follow and gave you a clear picture of why my ancestors and so many others traveled halfway around the world to the windswept prairies of North Dakota. It's a tale of promise, perseverance, and keeping one's identity against all odds. If you enjoyed learning about the Germans from Russia, please like the video and subscribe for more stories of heritage and history. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.